What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Locks DFS NFL breakdown video. We're going to be covering this Thursday night football slate for Week 8. We've got the Washington Redskins. We've got the Minnesota Vikings. It is a 16-point spread. I am Christian Hardy, at by Hardy on Twitter. I'm with Adi Narang, at really Adi on Twitter. And we're going to be breaking this slate. We are both from locksdfs.com. So before we get into it, this is where we do our weekly giveaway. If you're not subscribed to us, if you're not subscribed to us, do it because it'll enter you to win the pass. It helps us out. And all you got to do is leave comments on as many videos, whether it's good feedback, whether it's your favorite plays. The guy we picked this week made a really good comment about the Rams offense in Addy's video, I think. So it's going to be, the winner is John St. Germain. Hit us up on, you can hit us up on at LocksDFS on Twitter or at by Hardy on Twitter. So the links are in the description, or at least the names are in the description. Leave a comment. You have a chance to win for next week's video. We'll do it at the beginning of Thursday night, Week 9 video. With that said, we have the the Minnesota Vikings favored by 16.5 points at home. The Redskins come in with a lowly 12.5 team total. Adi, what do you think about this game?
Honestly, when I first pulled this up, I thought that it's going to sound crazy, but I thought the Redskins team total was like a little bit low. I don't know why. I know that sounds crazy, and I know it's a crazy place to start with this showdown because obviously I know my build is going to come in with probably 5 Minnesota guys and run it back with like a Washington guy. It's going to be heavy Minnesota. But I did think that we've seen this Minnesota pass defense sort of give it up a little bit, like even last week versus Detroit. We saw him give up 4 touchdowns to Marvin Jones in a big game to Matt Stafford. Obviously, it's a way better offense, but I think obviously I'm starting at the contrarian part of it, so we should probably start with the chalk. But I think it's I think it's viable.
I think I've asked you what you think about the game, and I think even we've been talking before this, like your general thoughts on the game are like, wow, 16.5. Maybe not 16.5 is too high. Even it might even be that less than 2 touchdowns is too low. I
think I may be mixing, because the first thing I really thought when I saw this slate was that an 8K quarterback is cheap. That's the first thing I thought. Yeah. I should say that first, and I think that might be influencing how I feel about the Redskins in general because I'm trying to find that reason for it. But I always just look at quarterbacks on showdown slates, and even though it hasn't necessarily worked out too much this year, it just seems so obvious that you want to play the quarterbacks on each showdown slate. Like defenses aren't going to consistently keep getting there, although this is a matchup where it definitely could. It's just weird to see a defense priced, less than 2,000 away from a starting quarterback. That's really it.
Okay, so let's start at the top. We got Dalvin Cook. Just play him. Yeah, just play him. Dude's gonna play
started with that.
85% of the snaps, at least. I guess if they were blowing him out, we could see a little bit more Alexander Madison. But you don't have to captain him because he is 13,000. By the way, 13,000.
Is that the most expensive showdown player?
I know, right? You asked me that. I don't know. I definitely don't know for last year, but it feels like there hasn't been anyone over the 12Ks.
Yeah, I think this season that strikes me.
What was McCaffrey? He played Tampa Bay on primetime on a Thursday night, and could have been over 13.
He might have been over 13.
In that situation, we jammed McCaffrey captain, and I would prefer to start my cash builds with Cook captain as well, just for the record.
Yeah, it's such.
You don't click people in, but just so I know, we were working with 6-1 in the flex. We were going with Cook captain. So do we want to talk more about Cook? They're 16-point favorites at home. Minnesota's pretty much team established a run. They're missing the number 1 wide receiver. I don't know if that's really going to affect the play calling all that much, but it definitely should affect the passing game in general without Thielen to some extent. Although BC Johnson did look good last week and everything, I think Thielen's loss definitely still hurts. Redskins defense hasn't been good against the run. They haven't been good against pass either. The Redskins aren't good. I think, do you want to just move on from Cook? Do we have anything else to say about him?
Yeah, you just kind of have to play him on this slate. It's if you want to make a case for Dalvin Cook getting a few touches less coming off a short week, I think that's fine too. But even with, he's coming off 26 touches and just overall has been a total workhorse that if you do want to give him a sort of break, this could be the game, a Thursday night game versus the Redskins at home to give Madison a few more carries.
Mm-hmm.
But you still just have to play him. I mean, it's just the expected outcome of him going off and the relative ownership just makes it so that you kind of have to put him in your lineup. And I think everyone will be.
Since we're just on the Vikings running backs and we're mentioning Madison. Madison's a rookie from Boise State. He's played I don't know where his snaps are typically, but not over like 25% usually. I think that's about right. And he could, again, guy who could get more run. It's discouraging that he only has one target all year, but he's 4.4K, and definitely a viable start to your team would be something like this where you play both running backs with the defense. Makes a lot of sense. Okay, but moving on to Kirk Cousins, who is also really expensive. I prefer to go Cook captain, but Cousins captain isn't terrible. What's your take on Kirk Cousins against a pretty not a great Washington defense? They do Washington secondary especially.
My main concern here is just the upside. I think even we've seen Kirk Cousins be so good the past few weeks, but even with him being awesome, it hasn't really come on a plethora of attempts. He's not pushing 40 plus throws in these games. Like he's capped out at 36 in the Chicago game, and that's the most ever. And that's not the most ever. That's the most this season for him. And I mean, he's really, the main thing is he's just been super, super efficient. I mean, he's got 4 touchdowns in back-to-back games. Every time they get in the red zone, it seems like they're scoring, and they're drawing up a lot of plays. Like, they had that Dalvin Cook run on the 1 yard line that ended up being a Kirk Cousins touchdown to CJ Ham. Like they're throwing the ball in the red zone. And so he is getting, these slightly inflated scores relative to how much he's throwing the ball. So I don't know if he's necessarily worth the price tag, because it seems fairly straightforward that Minnesota would try and establish the ground game here like they did early in the season, kind of go back to Dalvin Cook and Madison.
Because they easily can in this game. Right.
It's going to be super easy. They should be leading by double, couple touchdowns, double digits at least throughout majority of the game. There's that Madison, not to go back on Madison, but just in relation to Kirk Cousins. We saw a game like Madison get 14 carries versus Philadelphia for 63 yards, or 12 carries versus Oakland when they built these commanding leads. And in those respective games, we didn't see Kirk Cousins throw the ball more than 30 times. So, it seems like this game is trending towards that direction.
I don't want to take anything away from Cousins' game last week, which was a great game. But, I mean, in 4 touchdowns on 34 passes, 4 touchdowns on 29 passes, that's some pretty good run good for him. That seems unlikely, like you said. And at 12K, I don't think he's an awesome value at 12K in a massive as a massive favorite. So moving on, though, there is interest in his wide receivers. Thielen is out. That should open up some pretty solid targets for Diggs, who has over 100 yards in 3 out of 4 games. And after his squeaky wheel obviously popped off against Philadelphia. If you don't know squeaky wheel, shout out to I don't know who started it, but I hear it on Establish the Run. But talking about Stephon Diggs, and I mean, just started complaining about his role. And at this time, I could definitely see it 10 targets here. There is a corner for Washington. I'm so bad remembering defensive backs' names that has been really good this year. That is probably going to be on Diggs. Doesn't really concern me too much just because the volume. I think Diggs is a solid cash play, but if you can find the extra 1,000 to get the Cousins over Diggs, I don't mind that either. Do you have too much to say about Diggs? Like I said, I think the volume goes up here. I think the price is still expensive, even though the volume is going to go up. But he has the most touchdown equity among the receivers. He has the biggest target share among the receivers by quite a bit. The Redskins have allowed the 6th most receiving touchdowns this year. So.
Yeah, it's a smash spot for him. And I think what's interesting here is, you remember when Stephon Diggs was out last year towards the end of the season, and Adam Thielen, everyone kept expecting Adam Thielen to have these massive games, and he never did. I think I remember reading a few articles about that and some tweet threads that were talking about how Adam Thielen needs Stephon Diggs to succeed more than Stephon Diggs needs Adam Thielen.
That makes sense.
I think it's fairly straightforward. I think it's not an unpopular opinion to say that Stephon Diggs is probably better than Adam Thielen. He's,
if you put him in any other random offense.
Right, exactly. And so I think this is a spot where I don't know if people are going to try and think back to that and be like, oh, these guys depend on each other. But I think Diggs is going to more likely benefit from like an NBA type situation where one player is out and the other player actually does pick up all that usage and stuff. I think that probably happens in this game, especially in this matchup. So yeah, I think Stephon Diggs. I'm much more. I feel like as of now, I'm much more inclined to pay for Stephon Diggs than I am for Kirk Cousins because I think majority of Kirk Cousins' production will go through Stephon Diggs.
Going straight down the list here, Terry McLaurin. So we're surprisingly, the Vikings corners have been really bad this year. I don't have the stats in front of me on Xavier Rhodes, but they're not good, and he should likely be on McLaurin for a good bit of this game, I think, as the likely Vikings number one. Washington's obviously expected to have to pass. McLaurin, if you take this game out against San Francisco, which was disgusting and you should ignore, 7 targets, 9 targets, 8 targets, 7. Still not great volume for the price, but in terms of relative to the offense, who doesn't throw all that much, I guess actually these first 3, he threw a lot more. Why did he get pulled in this game?
Yeah,
he got pulled in that game. Yeah.
And then there was the coaching change, and they just want to run the ball now, so that's why the throw.
So that's going to be an issue. Like running the ball is going to be a big problem for them because Adrian Peterson has I don't know if he has 2 ankles. He has 2 ankle sprains.
I guess
he has
so.
He has 2 ankle sprains and he's supposed to play apparently.
Poor guy, man. Grade 1 high ankle sprain and the grade 2 low ankle sprain.
I don't know, man. It doesn't seem like he's going to play to me, but he was limited in practice. It's a narrative returning to – speaking of narrative, by the way, we didn't mention that with Case Keenum, former Redskin. Evan Silva.
With Kirk Cousins?
Yeah. Sorry, Case Keenum. Kirk Cousins, yeah.
Well, with Case Keenum, too. Isn't there a Case Keenum narrative here, too? Didn't he play for Minnesota? He played for Minnesota.
Yeah, he played for
Stephon Diggs on that miracle in Minnesota versus that. Like, there's narratives all over this game.
Holy shit!
Yeah.
So Adrian Peterson obviously narrative coming back home, but yeah, I mean they were pretty brutal to Kirk Cousins when he was on his way out of Washington. What was I scrolling down for? Oh yeah, about Peterson. If he's out, I mean, since we talked about the chalk at the top already, we're gonna go back. We're gonna go back to where we were, Terry, in a second because we are. I feel like I've got sidetracked a little bit here. Wendell Smallwood is going to fill in straight up for Adrian Peterson as he filled in last week for Chris Thompson, who's out as a change of pace back, and he should end up getting a decent amount of looks just as just a pure runner because Adrian Peterson's ankles. Whether he plays or not is a question. Whether they hold up or not is a question. Who else do they? I'm not sure who else they have added to the roster, to be honest with you, and I haven't looked into these guys at all. Yeah, Craig Reynolds got promoted from the practice squad, and Michael Burton agreed to a deal last week. I don't know.
I mean, Smallwood's probably going to end up being one of the more chalkier players on this slate. I would imagine with the injury concerns to Adrian Peterson, the fact that they're just not going to be able to run the ball with any success, they're going to have to revert to the throw. Smallwood last week got 35% of the snaps, and he drew the only running back target as well, which is notable because they just don't use Adrian Peterson in the pass game. And Wendell Smallwood's a guy who's shown some sort of receiving prowess in the past. So it's like, I don't know. I think Smallwood's probably, 1.8K. I like it.
1.8K. Like, you see a guy with a real roll in a 2K, you just smash it. And on FanDuel, he's minimum. So, like,
I like his chances of matching probably Dan Bailey's score for 2.2K more, I think. Yeah. So for that reason alone, I think he makes a lot of sense.
This is where I'm getting most of my build. If I was like multi-entry GPPs, I would start a good amount of them with this right here, and then deviate to 4. For the record. Okay, back to Scary Terry. What's your take on him? I feel like I already talked about him a little bit.
Yeah, I like him. I really do. I think I think you can really toss out last week's game as far as any sort of offensive production. I mean, it was just the field conditions were awful. I'm sure you all saw the videos. They ran the ball with Adrian Peterson 20 times and only threw it with Case Keenum 12. So I think you can ignore that, but I don't think the masses might put that together. So I think that's one reason his ownership might be fairly low. Minnesota Vikings have sneakily allowed the most catches in the league this year, just straight up. We've seen him give up bad games to receivers. I referenced back to Marvin Jones last week. They're playing in Minnesota. That's a dome with turf. Scary Terry runs a 4.35 40. Speed is always beneficial on turf. It's always accentuated on turf. So I think it makes a lot of sense. Xavier Rhodes is Pro Football Focus's 88th ranked cornerback. That's a stat from you. So I think it makes a lot of sense to have Scary Terry here, especially if you want to take the route that the Washington Redskins can find any sort of passing success during the game, and if not, some semblance of passing success in garbage time. Then I think it makes even more sense to have him because you can. The cool thing about the Showdown is that the receiving game workload is fairly condensed now with Thielen out, and with no one really else. Vernon Davis is out. Jordan Reed obviously. No, Adrian Peterson doesn't catch passes. Chris Thompson is out. You can really just narrow in on a couple guys, and so I think it's fairly easy to narrow where this receiving production is going to come from. So Terry makes a lot of sense for me here. I like the price too. I think it's fine.
Yeah, outside of Smallwood, my highest exposure for a Washington guy would be McLaurin if I was making several GBPs. And then probably Keenum. Okay, moving down. Vikings defense. We've talked about Case Keenum enough. He's cheap. However, their team total is also 12.75. I don't think that you want more than 2 Washington pieces in your cash lineup, Wendell Smallwood being one of them. So Case Keenum to McLaurin makes some sense in like GBPs, but I don't really think that it's too much in play in cash games at all. Keenum's a great GBP play though, especially if no one's going to own him at 8K.
Yeah, he really is a great GPP play.
Yeah.
If Case Keenum comes in sub 40, 35% in GPPs, which I imagine
pretty good chance it doesn't work out, but still, good process play.
It's not going to work out majority of the times, but it's an 8K quarterback, and when it does work out, we've seen Case Keenum have big games. Obviously, he came with a different coach, a coach that was much more willing to throw the ball. But this guy put up over 30 versus Philly, and he put up real serviceable games versus 2 good defenses in Dallas and Chicago. He's shown competency in Minnesota. And so like he doesn't have to get there necessarily in as long as he doesn't make mistakes and gets pulled from the game, which I don't think he will.
No, he won't get pulled. He won't get pulled.
They made a commitment through week 10 and starting Dwayne Haskins in week 11. So I mean, he could get there in garbage time. He could see a classic Blake Bortles garbage time game where the guy ends up getting there. Like Mitch Trubisky got there versus the Saints, 2 touchdown passes in the fourth quarter. Like that stuff happens all the time, and so it's not out of the realm of possibility here.
If I had in my lineup though, I'd probably just I'd really want to get the 1200 to get to McLaurin. But okay, let's move down. Vikings defense definitely in play. They are very expensive, and they're probably going to need a touchdown at this price or a shutout. To be honest with you, to really pay their price off. But that doesn't mean they're not in play. We've seen these heavy – this is an extremely heavy favorite for one. 16.5 points is a lot. But we've seen these heavy favorites get way priced up, and they have run really well. And obviously twice it's been the Patriots who have one of the best defenses that I've seen in years. This is not the same situation. The Vikings have a pretty middling pass rush. They have a good run-stopping defense, but a middling pass rush their pass rush is led by like Everson Griffin. He's good, but he's not like an elite pass rusher. So I don't know. I don't think their price of 6.8 is like stand out to me. Of course, the price of 6.8 isn't like stand out to me, but at the same time, the Redskins are slated for 12.75 points or whatever it was. Yeah. So like, they're definitely in play as a cash play. I'm not as high on them in GBPs unless you're building like I said, a Cook Medicine Vikings defense type thing. I think that's probably enough to say about the Vikings defense. I think they're a cash play. I probably am not as high on them in GBPs. Okay. Olabisi Johnson played the slot last week after Thielen left the game. I think he's a rookie.
Yeah, he's a rookie.
Yeah. I recognize the name from college football, but I can't remember where he played last year. But, yeah, so 6,200, got 8 targets after Thielen left last week. Again, has a pretty nice matchup in cornerback matchup with the Redskins. How do you feel about Olabisi?
So yeah, we pretty much have a full game workload or full game sample size with him because Thielen got hurt on one of the first plays of the game on his 25-yard touchdown. So in that last game, he did play 71% of snaps. Obviously, as Christian said, 8 targets. This Washington team is pretty horrible defending slot receivers. They've allowed 47 completions on 55 targets to slot receivers. Pretty awful. That's over 9 yards per attempt and 4 touchdowns to go along with that. So it's a very good spot, for Olabisi Johnson. I'm not entirely sure where I'm going to end up going with him. I know there's some lineup builds that, there's some 5 Minnesota lineup builds that make a lot of sense to just sort of onslaught Minnesota, and he fits right into them. So I think for those teams, he makes a lot of sense. But yeah, he's totally viable and will probably generate, some decent ownership as well, especially if you were to pick up like Thielen's production almost 80% of something.
We should get most. You should get most of the snaps. I feel good about a snap share, which is good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Moving down, Adrian Peterson, don't play him. Kyle Rudolph, Irv Smith Jr. If Adrian Peterson goes off after me saying that,
did you go back?
I got to do something crazy. I got to do something crazy because that would be insane. I think the only path is somehow the Redskins get stopped at the 1 or 2 twice, and he gets to carry both times. Because total yardage wise, he's not going over 50 yards in this game.
Yeah, some Sony Michel run good,
Yeah, for real. So Kyle Rudolph, Irv Smith Jr. have been getting this splitting the reps at tight end. Irv Smith Jr. saw a little bit of a bump in his actually a season high in snaps and also receptions, targets. Actually, both of them last week with after Thielen left. So they should be running some extra 2 tight end sets. Irv Smith Jr. is a guy who did do some, he's a guy who catches passes he's a receiving tight end, whereas Kyle Rudolph later in his career started to look a little bit less like one, but that doesn't mean he won't factor in as well. You see both them last week when we saw Thielen leave last week, both got 6 targets. I actually think that because I'm expecting VC Johnson to be higher owned than these tight ends, and because of that, I do think that these guys are both very interesting GPP plays. I prefer Irv. I just think he's a better athlete. I would be interested to know where he landed on player profile or actually in terms of tight ends. Adi, if you want to look at that. But yeah, I prefer Irv, but I think they're both really good, strong pivots off Olabisi Johnson if we see him coming in chalk, or even the Vikings defense, even though that's not as a straight line pivot as off of BC, off the Vikings defense. But yeah, anyway, do you have his profile up?
Yeah, he's good. 4.63 40, 61st percentile spark score, best comparable Eric Ebron. Seems like a pretty athletic tight end. I'll watch some Irv Smith Jr. What's Irv Jr.?
He wasn't a breakout guy in college, but he's not he's no TJ Hawkinson, but
I'll watch some Irv Smith Jr. highlights before bed tonight, and then
Alexander Madison talked about him. Dan Bailey, very good cash play, 4K. I kind of tend to shy away from kickers and GBPs, but definitely someone you can still throw in GBP lineups. Treadwell, deep threat. He played snaps last week. I'm not sure exactly how much, but he's going to run as a team's number 3 receiver. He is very cheap for that role, but like I said, Minnesota ran a lot of 2 tight end sets last week.
Yeah.
So I just don't know how much Treadwell is going to be on the field. I would expect 40% snaps at best.
He only played 14% of the snaps last week, so I don't expect much from him.
I think Trey Quinn has a better floor right below him, actually.
Yeah, Trey Quinn plays 60% of the snaps.
Yeah, Trey Quinn plays about 60% of the snaps, plays the slot. I think possibly could lose some snaps to the boy Steven Sims Jr., who rushed for that super long touchdown, 60-something yard touchdown against the Patriots. Rock chalk. He's not getting snaps. Trey Quinn's playing the slot snaps, so that is what it is. Jeremy Sprinkle, tight end 1 for Washington, because Vernon Davis is out. Don't really want him. He's maxed out at 24 yards and 3 targets. He's had 2 tough matchups, to be fair, so this could be the game. Who knows? But not really a cash play for me. I'd rather play the kicker right here, Dustin Hopkins. Redskins defense.
Dustin Hopkins, we should talk about that. He's a full 1,000 less than Dan Bailey. I don't think the expected point outcome for kickers should vary enough for $1,000 salary difference, and we've seen Minnesota give up yardage. So if Minnesota,
Yeah.
Minnesota's given up over 400
Yeah.
yards in back-to-back games. So it's like that's where I'm coming from when I'm talking about like Case Keenum. I think they could put together drives, not necessarily score points, but I think they could put together drives. And if they do put together some drives here and there, we could see like 3 field goals from Dustin Hopkins, and that's like
In a lot of my builds, that 1,000 will allow you to go up if you want to go up from Diggs to Cousins. So that's that's the most applicable reason for that 1,000. And below that, you're pretty much getting none of these guys are really in play. Is this Amir Abdullah? I thought he retired.
Dude, I have no clue.
Anyway, I don't even know how he's on a roster. But yeah, okay, that's a wrap, right? Redskins defense projecting well, but they're 2.2K. That's probably the cheapest defense we've seen on one of these slates. But you're hoping for 5 points there, so I wouldn't do it.
Yeah,
just get up to Hopkins there.
They don't even generate pressure like that. They're like 20th overall in generating.
There's nothing good going on there at all.
Right.
Okay. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully this video wasn't too long for you guys. Like I said, be sure to check us out at locksdfs.com. We have our season pass up there, NFL season pass. We also have our 3-sport pass up for $60 a month, which will give you college football, NBA, NFL. We do the full written breakdowns over there. So for Adi and for Christian, me, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys back here next time. Peace.